Idsinga of the Toronto Police Service has said that the most recently announced victim doesn't quite fit the profile that we have seen before. Burston, the Canadian press, via Associated Press. For more than a month, the police in Toronto have been trying to solve a mystery. They had a photograph of an unidentified dead man, and they had discovered human remains in planters where a man suspected of multiple killings had worked as a landscaper. On Monday, the police announced that they had put the pieces together, charging the suspect, Bruce McArthur, with first-degree murder in the death of an eighth alleged victim, Krishna Kumar Kanagaratnam, the man in the photograph. The development was weeks in the making. Investigators released Mr. Kanagaratnam's photograph to the public on March 5, declining to say where it had come from and appealing for help identifying him. They enlisted the assistance of an officer who spoke Tamil, and coordinated with Mr. Kanagaratnam's family, who was still in Sri Lanka. The stress and anxiety over dealing with hundreds of tips, hundreds of missing persons occurrences and dozens of potential identifications for the eighth victim has been enormous. Sergeant Idsinga said at a news conference. He said Mr. Kanagaratnam had arrived in Canada from Sri Lanka in 2010, and lived in Toronto. He was believed to have been murdered between Sept. 3 and December 14, 2015, at the age of 37, but his name was not on file with the department as a missing person. Sergeant Idsinga also said the department had no evidence that would link Mr. Kanagaratnam to the city's gay village, a predominantly gay neighborhood. Most of the other victims had known ties to that community or were Mr. McArthur's sexual partners. The case has unsettled Toronto and exposed a rift that has lingered for decades between gay residents and law enforcement officials there. Men had been vanishing from the village, where clusters of streets have traditionally served as a meeting place for gay, lesbian and transgender people, for decades. Anger among gay activists has grown over accusations that the authorities were neglectful in missing person cases involving gay men for years. As the Times reported in February, it has shaken the LGBTQ community to the core. Councillor Kristen Wong-Tam, whose ward includes the downtown neighborhood featuring the gay village, said, "People have responded with a mix of emotions from absolute horror to anger. There is a level of frustration that I think is quite palpable, especially as it relates to wanting more answers and not getting them in a timely fashion." In December 2017, the Toronto Police Chief, Mark Saunders, said there was no evidence of a serial killer, prompting outrage when Mr. McArthur, a 66-year-old landscaper, was arrested weeks later. On Jan. 18 this month he was charged with the murder of Abdul Basir Faizi, who disappeared in December 2010. Mr. McArthur had previously been charged with 6 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of 6 men: Sela Mason, Andrew Kinsman, Sorej Mahmoodi, Dean Lisowick, Majid Kayan and Skandinaratnam. Remains of all of the men, except for Mr. Kayan, were recovered from planters on a property where Mr. McArthur worked. Mr. Kanagaratnam doesn't quite fit the profile that we have seen before, Sergeant Idsinga said, referring to the lack of evidence of ties between Mr. Kanagaratnam and the gay village. Sergeant Idsinga said that the department was working through its list of outstanding missing person cases, and that it was looking at cold cases. "This does create basically a wide-open net," he said. "We've had lots of calls, international calls, since our police began, from people who just haven't seen family members in years." Mr. Kanagaratnam's family had written on Facebook over the years about their efforts to locate him, as the Globe and Mail reported. They said they lost contact with him during a period when he tried unsuccessfully to get permanent asylum in Canada. Mr. McArthur will return to court later this month on all 8 charges. The police have not said whether there will be further charges or identification of additional remains. Immigrants account for about half the population of Toronto. Ms. Wong-Tam said that Mr. Kanagaratnam had reached Canada's shores after months on a boat in his quest for asylum. He risked his life to try to flee a politically unstable country in a region where he was facing violence, she said. For him to face his imminent death in Toronto in such a way is heartbreaking.